tells us more about these ancient Danites. At the time of about Moses, when he led the children out of Israel with the kingdom of Egypt left in shambles, some chose not to follow Moses into the land of Canaan. About 1500 BC, a last flowering of megalithic culture occurred. On the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean Sea, a tower-building people, sometimes called Shardana, emerged and soon dominated Sardinia, and then invaded Corsica and the Balearics, and ruled them for about 1,000 years. These were the ancient Danites. Their very name identifies them. They gave their name to their island, Sardinia, and the very name Shardana proves who they really were. This is fascinating. Now, we're going to go to the island of Sardinia, and what I found was amazing. There are a list of tombs called the Giants' Tombs, and in identifying, or the Giants' Graves, and in identifying these graves, I found a grave in the city of Dorgali called Ene Tomes, and this grave is fascinating. Let's take a look. Now, this grave is aligned exactly to 88.88 degrees. Danos is the technical species name of the monarch butterfly, okay? And then we found that the exact reference, according to Wikipedia, of Danos was of the tribe of Dan. And we have also found that Dan has 8s throughout its culture. Now we have a butterfly with an 88 on its wings. There is an 88, it is black and white, it is on this moth. I do not know how it got there, but it is there, and it is a real moth. Now, the species name is Dana. Wow. But that is not the only thing that tells us about this grave. When I plotted the actual coordinate of the grave, it came out to 44.44 degrees north latitude. That tells us that these giants actually had an affinity to this number 8 and 4. We are going to learn things about the monarch butterfly that you have never learned before. We will link this into the modern day leadership, and we'll also link this into the number 8. Now the first thing we're going to do is count the number of units on this monarch butterfly caterpillar, and they are all the same. When we leave off each end with the antenna, we have exactly 8 units. Now the way to count this is to look at the black stripe surrounded by white. That is what we're counting. Okay, so, and that makes sense. Black and white Illuminati. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and every single one of these caterpillars has 8 units as described. Now, I looked at the naming of the actual monarch butterfly, and this is Wikipedia. This butterfly is named after Danos. Now, who is Danos? Well, I will show you. Danos is from the tribe of Dan. It states out here in this historic book. It says Danos of the tribe of Dan landed at the city of Argos and gained control of it. Now, who was Dan in the Bible? Dan, it says here, was the 5th son of Jacob with Bilhah. He was Bilhah's first son, the founder of the Israelite tribe of Dan. In the biblical accounts, Dan's mother is described as Rachel's handmaid. And I want you to look, of course, at the as above, so below symbology here, with the 2 inverted pyramids. And of course, this is the Star of David. But inside this mark, you also see the serpent. Now, then it says here, owing to the book of Judges, in the account of Micah's idol, describing the tribe of Dan as having used ephod and teraphim in worship, and Samson, a member of the tribe of Dan, being described as failing to adhere to the rules of Nazarite. Classical rabbinical writers concluded that Dan was very much a black sheep. Now this Wikipedia article goes on. but I found a very interesting article here about the tribe of Dan and the serpent seed. And it says here, the tribe of Dan is one of the 12 tribes of Israel. They are named after their ancestor Dan, who was one of the sons of Jacob of Israel. Dan means to judge, govern, or rule. There are a couple of hints and cryptic prophecies that seem to provide warning about this tribe. These prophecies seem to imply that Dan will eventually become mixed with fallen angels. These also seem to imply this tribe will play some important and possible nefarious role in the end times deception. The tribe of Dan is also left out of the sealed 144,000 of all tribes of Israel. This implies that the tribe of Dan will no longer be considered Israelites. So it makes sense that the tribe of Dan is in leadership today in our world government. And they just so happen to name the monarch butterfly after the tribe of Dan. Danaus plexippus, right here in Wikipedia. There are many of them, and these are just the major ones. Now this tomb at Cana is 15 feet long. Look at this. This is simply amazing. Anyone tells you that giants did not walk the earth, you can show them this information. This tomb was 15 feet long. This one at Sodome Soorku City is 36 feet long, and it's at 140 degrees. Here's another, the tomb of San Cosimo, and as you can tell, they all share the same pattern, this semicircle with an oval behind it. This particular one is oriented northbound. Once again, it's not exactly 180 degrees, but it's very close. This one measures 55 feet in length. Very large people. This was the very first one that I checked because it was shown down here in the image gallery, so naturally I checked it, and I just knew in my heart it would come out to 88 degrees, and sure enough it did. Because when you know truth, you know it. Now here is the tomb. Google Earth does not give us a really good picture of it, but these are some 3D models, and here is the tomb. And look at the size of this tomb, you guys. That would hold a giant. I don't understand why they don't excavate this or do some underground sonar readings to see what is under there. This is a massive structure. This is another one, and we'll look at this one as well. And if you see the entrance there, a person can fit through that. So that gives you an idea of the mass scale of these structures. Why archaeologists have not descended on these sites and looked at these things is beyond me. But I can tell you that it was very hard to find out information about this tomb and its exact location. I found only one site that had the coordinates. Otherwise, I would have never found exactly where it is. Once again, this little doorway here is where a human could walk through. So this gives you an idea of the scale of this particular tomb. The tribe of Dan is represented by the number 8. The number 8 is represented by a sword in one hand and scales of justice in the other. And the scales of justice are the symbol for the tribe of Dan. So they are the number 8. We've also found many locations on the 88th parallel, longitudinal parallel, But let's get into these butterflies, you guys. This is fascinating. Now, we all covered the story of Samson. Samson was a Danite, and Samson found a lion's carcass full of bees. So, let's look at these insects. The monarch butterfly. The scientific name is DANS. It encodes the word Dan in the name of the butterfly. Now, this is not an accident, and you're going to see that throughout all of these insects that we cover. But also, the monarch butterfly begins its fall migration in August, which is the 8th month of the year, 18th, every year, right really close to that same date. And now we're going to go to the green bee. It is called the Ogochloropsis metallica, and of course it has August in its name as well. You're going to start to see the trend here, and it is unmistakable and undeniable. And this is where Metallica most likely got their name. We also have the Diathera anna. This butterfly actually has 88 on its wing, and its name is Diana, which has the tribe of Dan encoded in it as well. And last but not least, we have the Death's Head hawk moth. Okay, this was featured in Silence of the Lambs, but also this particular hawk moth have been observed raiding beehives of different species. So all of these things interrelate together, you guys. Bees, moths, monarchs. So when I point out these symbols in the movies, it might not necessarily be an actual monarch butterfly, but it will be representative of one of these things that point back to the tribe of Dan. And this rabbit hole of Dan is just going off the deep end. Now, the tribe of Dan, we discovered Dan, the original person who founded this tribe, was born on the 9th day of Elul. Now, Elul, and it states here this in Wikipedia, Elul is the month of August, which is the 8th month of the year, and it spills over into September apparently, but it is a Jewish calendar. So it is very possible that Dan was born on 8/9. Metallica was one of my favorite bands growing up in the 80s and 90s. I loved their work. It had a magical type of effect on me, and I still listen to Metallica. Okay, now the tribe of Dan, one of their main symbols, because they were seen as judges, they have the serpent, and they also have the scales. And here it is, the scales.
And the Black Album, the 4th and 5th albums, back to back. The scales and the serpent of the tribe of Dan.
Now, you guys probably know where I'm going with this, but it gets deeper. Metallica is made up, of course, by these 5 individuals: James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett. Robert is new to the group. But first we're going to look at Lars Ulrich. And Lars Ulrich is a Danite from Denmark. He is Danish. It states that right here. Again, this is not a judgment. What this indicates is that these people pick and choose who they will promote, push forward, who will be famous. And the illusion is that normal people like you or I can also be famous, and that we can also be president, and that we can also have some power in this reality. But in actuality, we don't have a shot in the dark unless you're a part of this elite club. And they make it appear as though these people start from the bottom and work their way up. But in actuality, many doors were opened to them, and all this is planned because they're all players in a giant play. Is it a mistake that Lars Ulrich is from Denmark? That though James is the lead singer, it always appears as though Lars is the one kind of pulling the strings and making the rules, and he's the drummer of the band. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have one person that is kind of the person pulling the strings, the person making it happen, to infiltrate, so to speak. Let's take a look at Injustice for All. probably a good idea at this point because, as you know, and Justice for All released in 1988. Are you guys starting to see how this works? Now, this is the first studio album since Cliff Burton's death. It was a commercial success. I remember this album clearly. It's a great album. Alright, let's take a look at the cover of Truth or Judgment. And we match those right up to the Tribe of Dan. See how this works, you guys? And here is a side-by-side of the symbol known as the Tribe of Dan, the scales, and the cover of the Metallica poster and Justice for All, also with the scales being pulled down. Now this fits in with the Bible narrative that the Danite history shows that they actually judged people. They were the judges of society, okay? And it's showing here that they are judging America on the Metallica poster, from what I can tell. Let's take a look at Flemming Rasmussen. That sounds like a Danish name. He was the producer. Let's take a look. And he was also a Danish engineer. What you're looking at here, this is Flemming Rasmussen. He helped produce Justice for All Metallica album. We're going to zoom in on what he's wearing around his neck. And that is a black cross. Now, this is the Black Cross. It's called a Balkan Kreuz, and it was the emblem of German armed forces and its branches. So this is the Black Cross, the German army. Okay, it was put on their planes and is being worn by Flemming Rasmussen. And of course, this is another 8 reference here. Now, there's an interview here, and this is where I derived this picture from, of Flemming Rasmussen being interviewed about Metallica. And there's some interesting anecdotes in here. He says here, I had the advantage of being able to speak to Lars in Danish, and that gave us some degree of freedom, as nobody knew what we were talking about. But the conflict between Lars and James was not that big a problem, as they were on the way up, and that is so much funnier than being in the top and fighting to maintain your position. Interesting. It appears as though the Tribe of Dan is Germany and Denmark. It says here, all these things reflect the pattern for Dan's people, which shows up in more modern times as the nations of Germany and Denmark. Most people remember Germany by the fascism state, which took place under Hitler. So here is our 8 connection. This is why we found all these 8s. Fascism is a system of government that has ruthless and strict social and economic control over its people. It's generally always headed by a dictator. So basically, the Tribe of Dan came forth from the tribe of Manasseh, and this is spoken of in the Bible. Well, how did they leave the Manasseh territory? It says here in 1015 CE, Canute the Great, a son of a Danish king, set sail with his fleet of 200 longships and an army of around 10,000 men. Canute was a great Danite and boasted about his large troop of Viking warriors that were simply fearless. There was a war with the Manasseh, which used to be called England, and Germany and Denmark literally leapt forth out of England, fulfilling the Bible prophecy of Manasseh. This article goes into some detail about the likelihood that the Tribe of Dan is also Germany. We're here is to talk about the race of red-headed people, which is the Tribe of Dan. Now, all of us may have, or many of us may have, some of this bloodline. This isn't about condemnation. This is about uncovering the truth. After all, only those who are in the know are the ones that are in power and who wield that power over us through their secrets. So here is where the Holy Spirit touched me this morning, and it showed me and revealed truth. It just popped into my head that Todd, the name Todd, was actually the acronym for Tribe of Dan. T-O-D, Tribe of Dan, Todd. So I just so happened to check to see what associations the name Todd had with people with red hair. And sure enough, we have the Batman character who became the second Robin, and he was called the Red Hood. And of course, he has the appearance of red hair. But it doesn't stop there. We also have the baby name Todd, which actually means a toddler who actually has traits and characteristics similar to a fox, such as having red hair. And here it is. Now, then you start to wonder, the term toddler. Why? So now we're starting to get to the truth. And the 8s abound in this record, you guys. Let's start from the top. Now, what else I found is that the album was certified 8 times platinum, and they shipped 8 million copies to the US. These are no accidents. We also have the 598 EP, Garage Days Revisited. Not 599, but 598. And then we get this cryptic quote from James Hetfield saying that songwriting-wise was just us really showing off and trying to show what we could do. We've jammed 6 riffs into one song. Let's make it 8. Now there's some commentary on the lyrics here that I thought were interesting. Lars Ulrich described the songwriting process as our CNN years with him and James Hetfield watching the channel in search of song subjects. When we look at Denver, or Danver, all the zip codes in Denver fall under number 8, as seen here. Now, if you had any questions about the number 8, I think that this might answer them. The Church of Satan. Xena was the spokeswoman and high priestess with the Church of Satan during the 1980s. During this period, she appeared on television and radio broadcasts, in part to educate about the church, and in part to debunk the mythology surrounding the Satanic Panic, a period of time in the same era in which Satanism was blamed for the actions of satanic ritual abuse. Now, Xena was in charge of a rally, the first major rally of the Church of Satan in San Francisco on the date of, take a wild guess, 8/8/1988. A large gathering converged on the Strand Theater in San Francisco for the film debut of a mockumentary about Charles Manson. The event, planned and carried out by Xena's husband, Nicholas Schreck, was the largest single gathering of this kind in history. Xena spoke at the beginning of the rally, and a film of her baptism was played. In 2011 interview with Xena for French music magazine Obscure, she stated that 8/8/88 would be the only performance that Nicholas, the original percussionist, Evil Wilhelm, and I ever performed live together. That marked the transition point, spanning 3 phases of Radio Werewolf. Geraldo Rivera's Devil Worship Exposing Satan's Underground film crew have filmed the event, as well as interviews with all involved to use for the network special. This is the Tribe of Dan Zig, the band, the metal band from Sweden. We've talked all about the Tribe of Dan. On the 8th of August, Danzig released their first album in 1988. So this is 8/88. And I want you to look at the 8th song on the album. And it is called The End of Time. And it is 4 minutes and 2 seconds long. 2 times 4 is 8. We are so close to learning the truth, you guys. And for some reason this year it is intensifying, and we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it in movie trailers. We're seeing it in the movie Lucy coming out on her passport in 1988. We're seeing it in, Transformers movie trailer. We also saw the movie Godzilla on the side of the USS Saratoga. We're seeing it everywhere, you guys. And of course, also people are dying at 88. And these people are all linked back to other 88s. And it is definitely a network. So the question becomes, we need to know what is going on. The death of the grandfather of the MDMA, which is ecstasy. And he died at 88 today. And we just released a video showing MDMA's Nazi German roots. And the person that invented it was born in 1888, of course. So back to the topic of this video, you guys. We did also a video on E.T. And E.T. is now, we've discovered, Elliot. The first and last letters of Elliot's name, but it's also the first and last letters of the number 8. And this is what they are trying to hide. And for those of you with eyes to see, you can look at this movie poster from E.T. and find the 8 in this poster. And the 8 is everything that we don't see. For everything that is dark, there must be light. There is opposites in everything in this universe. And the focus of this movie poster is the fingers touching. But what you don't see is the other 4 fingers. And that equals 8. This is the hybridization, so to speak, that is the theme of these last days. The hybridization between fallen angels and humans. And they were already portraying this in this 1980s film, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And all has to do with the tribe of Dan, the number 8, and everything else we're uncovering at this point. So you guys stay tuned. I want you to sub up. Check your subs regularly. They're unsubbing people from this channel as quickly as they are subbing. I see the numbers, and I've had hundreds of complaints from my subscribers telling me that they've been unsubbed over and over and over again, and they have to keep subbing up. We have talked extensively about Molech and the eyes of the owl being the figure 8 of time. And this is Spear Thrower Owl, a ruler that ruled ancient Teotihuacan right around 400 AD, just 400 years after Christ walked the earth. Now, Spear Thrower Owl was the ruler of Teotihuacan, and he went down into the Mayan lowlands and made a lasting impression. He was responsible for the influence in the Mayan area surge at Copan, and we'll be looking at Copan in Honduras. Now, this is Copan. This is one of the subsequent rulers after Spear Thrower Owl. And look at the iconography on his head up in this area. That, to me, is an owl. Now, where is Copan located? Let's take a look. This is Copan, and the red line that you were looking at is the 88th. Now remember, the eyes of the owl are like an 8, and this is all about time. What else falls on the 88th parallel? The Yucatan Peninsula Pyramids. But what you didn't know is that Chichen Itza belonged to a private owner until March 29th, 2010. And it was purchased by the Yucatan on that day, the 88th day of the year. It was designated a UNESCO Heritage Site in 1988. What else falls on this 88th parallel? We had the BP oil spill, 19 miles away from the line. We have Greene County, Alabama, Bowling Green, Kentucky. We have Greene County, Indiana, Casey, Illinois, Greenup, Illinois, Green Creek, Illinois, Greenville, Illinois. Greencastle, Indiana. Danville, Tribe of Danville, Illinois. Fermilab, the figure 8 particle accelerator. Everything goes back to 8s and time. This is the particle accelerator at Fermilab. What else do we have on the 88th parallel? Greendale, Wisconsin. Greenfield, Wisconsin. Green Lake, Wisconsin. Denmark, which is Danmark, Wisconsin. And of course, Green Bay, Wisconsin. In fact, fully half of all U.S. cities that start with the word green, Denmark, or Dan fall within 100 miles of the 88th parallel. Hopefully this is all making sense to you guys.